Hey everyone, welcome to He's Not Wrong, and I'm your host, Chad Dubois. Ever since last week's episode where I called out my speech impediment, I'm very self-conscious on saying, welcome to He's Not Wrong. I'm your host, Chad Dubois. When it comes out fast, it sounds weird. I apologize. I'm sorry for rehashing this, but as you might remember from that episode, I said that I was going to be on location here in Colorado. I'm in Buena Vista at the Airbnb. I wanted to be outside. I keep pointing. I see the mountains outside the window here, but it's too windy. I tried, and you know what? I try to give you all a view, but it's just not going to happen on this episode. But I am in the garage of the Airbnb. As you can probably tell on either side of me, there are garage doors. It is what it is. That's all I have to say about that. It is what it is. You might be able to hear an echo, and so I apologize for that audio quality. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode, I just really wanted to talk about a few things, as I do in each week. Each week, I start out with a few things that I'm not wrong about. And one thing that I'm not wrong about right now is that the Masters really took over my social media this past week. The Masters was last Sunday, and it was more prevalent on my social media than it has ever been in years prior. I refuse to believe that the amount of people on my social media care that much about golf. All throughout the year, they're never posting about golf. They're not posting about any celebrity or any athlete who is associated with or adjacent to that of golf. And so it was really shocking to me to see that the amount of people posting about the Masters actually cared about the Masters. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about this year that made that amount of people interested in the Masters. I would like to ask people, do you know what a birdie is? Do you know what a par is? I don't. I don't even know if I'm using those words properly. So I'm not going to pretend that I am a golf or Masters expert, because I'm not. And this episode isn't about golf, but it is about just how prevalent it was on social media, because it was insane. Every single post was about the Masters. People were having Masters themed parties at their houses and apartments, and were at bars dressed up as if they were at the Masters, but they weren't. So I'm trying to figure out in my head what it was about that event this year that made it so interesting for people to be in community with each other over. So if you have an answer to that question, please let me know. I'm curious. And if you would like to let me know, this is really fun. This is an update. This is a perfect segue into the next thing that I wanted to talk about. As a lot of you know, in prior episodes on my social media accounts and in the descriptions of the episodes, I always ask my audience to send in voice messages on Instagram and in my email about what they're not wrong about, what you're not wrong about, what hill are you willing to die on because you know that you're that right about what you're talking about. Well, a lot of people, it has become very evident to me, they don't know how to use voice memos on their phone, or they don't know how to send voice memos via email or Instagram DM. So what I did was I got a phone number and I set up a voicemail line. And that number is 205-538-3202. Again, that is 205-538-3202. I don't have that number memorized. I was just reading off of my phone, so that's why I was looking down at it. But if you want to call that number, you can leave me a voice message and let me know what it is that you're not wrong about. If you want to answer my question about the Masters and what it was this year that caused people to just be that obsessed with it, call that number. Let me know. I would love to feature your voice message on my podcast. So if you call that number, it will go to a voicemail line. After you hear the beep, I say a few words, but after you hear the beep, you can leave your voice message. It goes straight to my phone, and I'll be able to feature it on the podcast. So please call that number and let me know what you're not wrong about, and let me know what it was with Masters this year that just had people completely obsessed, because I don't know the answer to that. The other thing that I want to talk about is this episode is being released on Easter Sunday. And I am, again, going to have to pull out my phone for this one, because I saw an interesting TikTok today. And that TikTok was, it was one of those TikToks where a girl was on, just kind of vibing and recording herself. And there were words on the screen, And she wasn't doing anything other than just kind of dancing to some music, but that's the song that she was dancing to. And the words on the screen said, "Happy Easter, conservative weirdos. You would have hated Jesus and definitely deported him, but have a blessed day." And that just got me thinking. And my mind has been stuck on it all day because it's so true. What we're seeing from the federal government is messages and actions that are not aligned with who Jesus was, what he taught, the love that he put on display. And I think it's lost on a lot of conservative Christians that the Jesus that they say they love is the person that they want out of our country, and that they're supporting the government and punishing and harming and painting them as a bad individual, when a lot of times they're not. They're just trying to fend for themselves and make a living for themselves and to support their family. And so this Easter, if you're listening to this on Easter and in days after, I just would really like you to think long and hard about what messages about Jesus that you were taught, and then really think about the love and the messages that you learned, whether it was as a child or as an adult, and then really apply it to what's happening in our modern times with what's happening in our public policy. Do you truly think that is something that Jesus would have died for? Do you think that's something that he would have supported? Do you think if in our times Jesus was to cross the border with the messages that he had, is he someone that you would want to stay here? Think long and hard about that, because the answer I don't think is an easy yes for you if you are a conservative Christian. But that's all I have to say about that. Today's episode is not about the Masters, and it's not about Easter. It's actually about current events and news. So much of the news that we're receiving right now, whether it's on social media or the mass media, is just coming at us furiously. It covers many different topics, and it's really heavy. It's a lot to take in. And I personally, for one, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to really form opinions on some things, because it's just, you could hear one thing in the morning, another thing in the afternoon, and you're going to bed, and both of those things are not true anymore. So that's why I thought it was really important to have the Koch head, as a lot of you might know, Michael Coker. We get into why his name on TikTok is the Koch head in today's episode, but it's why I found it really important to have him on today's episode, to really figure out what is breaking news. Where are we going as a society when we are looking at what's happening, what we know has happened in the past? How can we apply that to what to expect in the future? So I'm really happy that he is on today's podcast. A lot of you might know him from TikTok, and that's where he has amassed a large following, where he shares current events, breaking news, and some pretty unfiltered opinions that are accurate and current, and things that I agree with, that I think a lot of you should hear. So again, he on TikTok, his name is Cokehead. Look him up. You can go into the description of this podcast, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. I'll link his information below. But we're really, really lucky to have him on today's episode to really break down a lot of things for us and to give his opinion on where we're going as a society. So without further ado, I would like to give all of you Michael Coker. Okay, Cokehead, welcome to He's Not Wrong. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so one thing that I want to discuss with you before we get into the conversation is, I talked about it on last week's podcast episode. I introed it on this episode, but it's the fact that on TikTok, you are known as Cokehead. Your name is Michael. I need to know the background on Cokehead.
Yeah, so Cokehead is just a play on words on my last name, which is Coker, Kocher. But it's just a play on words for the other Cokehead. Not affiliated, but yeah, just a play on words.
Okay, that was a lot more simple than I was expecting it to be. On TikTok, you're known for sharing news stories throughout the day, keeping people updated on relevant things happening throughout the news cycles. What was your inspiration for that, filling that content gap? How did you get that start on TikTok?
Yeah, so actually people that follow like my personal account on Instagram can probably attest to this, but I posted political news a lot on my personal Instagram, and I felt like, I was seeing the followers decline a little bit. So I was like, you know what? Let me move this to something that would be a bit more separate. So I figured that TikTok would be a great place for that. And it also, I think, another reason that I wanted to do this on TikTok was just because of the nature of the algorithm and, well, I should say how the algorithm used to be.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be very like worldly and global, and you would see these perspectives not just from like an insulated American United States point of view. And I felt like that not only helped me feel like I was reaching a lot of people, but also like the opposite. Like I was getting so much news and stories and seeing how people in other parts of the world lived. And I think my big takeaway is that it really is so different what the US tells us how the world is and how the world actually is. So I think that my main inspiration for doing this and keeping this going is just letting people know what's actually going on and ultimately what it means, how it impacts people, and what we can do about it.
Have you seen a shift in how your algorithm works? Do you still feel like you're reaching people that might not get the information that you're sharing otherwise before what happened in January and after? What's that difference been for you?
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a difference. I feel like pre January 20th, I guess we can call it, I got a lot of comments and interactions from both sides, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, one side was agreeing and one side had, other types of sentiment. But I feel like now, even when I use the same sort of strategies, SEO type of stuff with hashtags and everything, I'm really only getting like the liberal or left side of things. It really isn't as like both sides as it used to be.
Yeah.
So in terms of reaching those people that I feel like need to hear it, I'm feeling that less now because I feel like that crowd that I believe needs to hear it is the other side. But I also feel like there is still that appetite from people on the left, people who are more liberal, that they just want to stay up to date because, like we were talking about before the show, there's so much going on all the time that it really is so hard to keep up to date on everything. And even I can't, do or make a video on every single thing, which I would love to, but there's only so many hours in the day. But yeah, I feel like I've seen a change for sure.
Okay, so you kind of gave me the perfect opportunity for a segue right there, talking about just how much a news cycle throws at us each day. And originally, as you know, when I wanted you to come on to the podcast, it was about cutting through the bullshit that is the news right now. And
Mm-hmm.
so I and I don't mean all news is bullshit, but I think there's so much thrown at us that it's like they are really trying to get our clicks so they can get some advertising dollars. And so there's a bit of a sensationalism to what the mass media is doing with the news. But with all that's happening in the news cycle, how do you sort through all of it and figure out what is relevant to share with your followers? Say there's 200 news stories that comes out of DC in a day. How do you pick the 50 that you share?
Yeah, great question. So I feel like the thing that I typically fall back on is I don't know if everyone is familiar with this, but there's like that chart of like all these news sources and how left
Mm-hmm.
they lean and how fact based they are, or if they like give partisan commentary. And I feel like right at the center of that are outlets like Reuters and AP and Politico and NBC News and things that are not necessarily hyper partisan, but they just deliver the news to you in a way that allows you to interpret it based on the facts that you have and the knowledge that you have. And that said, I do think that it's important to double check stuff and not just rely solely on one article. Like you said, like if there's 200 articles, maybe read like, the top three to five and see like, oh, well, this one mentioned this, but none of the other ones did, and think, maybe I'll take that with a grain of salt as compared to the other stuff. Um, and I also think that it really, there's a difference between misinformation and disinformation, where misinformation is, I believe, like a misconstruing of the information or relaying it in a way that may not completely accurately portray what is actually
Hmm.
happening. And then disinformation, is the Trump regime's go to. It's just lies, fabrications. They just throw stuff at the wall and see what people believe. But in the news, especially since the inauguration, that we've been seeing, these publications bending the knee, as we like to say. They report on the disinformation like it's fact and like it's just another thing happening, and we should treat it like truth. So I would say, especially in today's climate, take everything with a grain of salt. Make sure you're checking multiple sources. Um, and yeah, hopefully that paired with my take on things can get people um, more aware of what's going on and fired up to bring about change.
One thing that I'm really passionate about living in Alabama is the fact that my mindset is so different than what the community is around me, and trying to figure out how to condense and summarize information in a way that people can understand, that isn't offensive to them or isn't too overwhelming if it differs from their mindset. And what I'm curious about with the work that you're doing on TikTok with sharing information and news, do you know if you've changed people's minds? And if so, what do you think it was and how you presented them the information that made them think, oh wait, he has a point. I should follow and listen, and their minds were changed from thereafter. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally. I feel like if that has happened, I have not been made aware of it, but I would love if that has happened. But I feel like in the way that I go about it in trying to make that happen is, I mean, using Trump's favorite slogan, like common sense, right? Like a lot of this stuff really is just common sense, and when you lay it out to people in a very common sense way of like, this is what he's doing, this is why it's illegal, or this is why it will harm people, this is what will happen, not just to trans people, people of color, immigrants, women. Like it's not just these groups that Trump says it's going to be everyone. So I feel like once you really get that through people's head, and by all means telling people isn't always the thing that's going to get people to like
Yep.
click and change their mind. Like as we talk about and we see all the time, like people sometimes it takes it happening to them for them to care, which sucks, and that is, I feel like, a morality issue that is separate. But yeah, I feel like if that has happened from my content, I am not aware of that. But that being said, if anyone is listening to this and that has happened, or actually, I don't know if this literally negates everything that I just said, but I have had people message me and say that they share their content with like friends or family members who
Yep.
are either, moderate or like Republican light, or those people that are like quote savable, so that brings me joy. But I don't know if like them sharing those videos with their friends and family has you know been successful in changing their mindset,
Yeah,
but
for
I hope so.
sure. I so I don't know if you're going to agree with me, so I don't know if I'm going to put what I'm about to say in the podcast.
Yeah,
But I think there's a difference between like conservative Republican and MAGA, and like
totally.
MAGA. I don't even that I can't help that.
Yeah.
I'm not changing that mind. But there is with the Republican conservative traditionalists, I guess you
Mhm.
would call them. there is something that with them that they see, okay, things aren't right. This isn't the party that I knew. And with them, like I have shared your content with them. I find like-minded individuals that can put information in a digestible format for them to hear
Hmm.
and sit on and think about. I know you said you don't have confirmation if you have changed minds, but I can guarantee that you have been a part of the process and helping people understand the issues that are happening and that things aren't right. So, I mean, I'm one of those people that have shared your content with people in hopes of bringing them in on our side. And that's one thing
Yeah.
that's one thing I hope on my channels too, is to quote what Cynthia or the Ariana interview, like I try to hold space. I try to make space and keep
We're
space
holding space. Yeah.
for everyone for when I don't mean to be condescending when I say this, but like when they wake up and when they start to have their moment of
Exactly.
realization. One thing that I want to go back to a little bit is the pre January 20th algorithm change and the audience that you see on your TikTok. So for our internet, for the people internationally who interact with your videos and see your news content, and with the stories that you share from that chart that you were talking about with the news
Mhm.
organizations, what's do you see a difference in how international news outlets share stories and information compared to how the US outlets share information? And if so, like I'm curious what those differences are that you see.
Yes, I absolutely do. So I think that to start, just because the United States is, by nature built as, operated as, maintained as like a capitalist society, that we just inherently value money over like any and everything, right?
Hmm.
So in other countries that are, I guess you could describe them as like more true democracies, since the US is like a democratic republic, um, you see other countries really hold their democratic values like to their core, and they don't let things like profit or money overshadow the rights of people.
Yeah.
And I feel like with what we're seeing now, there is a huge difference in how US media like the New York Times or the Washington Post report on the things that Trump specifically is doing and things that Elon's doing, etc., the whole gang, compared to how, like, Europe, for instance, reports on it. As we know, they can't really stand Elon Musk,
Hmm.
especially in the last several months as he's really fully embraced their alt right authoritarian party in Germany, as well as I forget exactly which countries, but there are a few over there that during the election season he like embraced with open arms and
Yeah.
endorsed them. And people in Europe, their memory is not short. They remember what happened almost 80 or so years ago during the Holocaust in Germany, and they say never again. We're not going back. We're not doing that again. And they report on things a lot more neutrally, I would say,
Mm.
than the United States does. And even though the United States, the way, like I said, like New York Times or Washington Post, the way they word things is neutral in the wording, but the sentiment is always like placating to Trump and making him seem like he's not that bad or like this is just a part of his strategy. And then in like a European newspaper, they're like, Putin loving Trump, like, does XYZ to take rights away from people, and just they say the facts and keep it neutral. But I feel like in the United States, we don't like that. Well, I should say that the faction of people that like Trump and support him and voted for him don't like that the facts don't make them look good. So they try to word the facts in a way that makes them look good. And I think that's really why we have a lot of people downplaying what's happening and saying, "Oh, it's that's just Trump. He's just joking. He's not going to do that, blah blah blah, all the other reasons." And then, the next day he turns around and does just what he said he was going to do.
I'm glad you brought that up because I always tell people in my immediate circle that just because the news makes someone look bad, if it's written neutrally, it doesn't mean it's political or partisan. If it makes
Right.
you look bad, it's probably, like, to
Because you
simply
did a
put
bad
it,
thing.
exactly.
Like,
So I'm glad you bring that up, because just because the news makes someone look bad does not mean that it is being hyper partisan. Um, that makes me angry when people make that assumption. But to also talk about a little bit about democracies and the rights that we have, and obviously in America, seeing all of our rights being under attack right now, with what you do and sharing information on TikTok and social media outlets, do you feel nervous from this point sharing that information, or are you like, no, I'm going to keep doing it no matter what?
that's a really good question. And I feel like we're seeing people that are, being detained and arrested simply for, leading protests or, posting certain things online. And I guess there's part of me that is anxious about the possibility of that happening, but I also know that as like a cisgender white man in America, like I'm not the person that is really going to be targeted or,
Yeah.
taken, or punished for that sort of thing. And don't get me wrong, like I could very well be, but I personally feel that I'm privileged enough to not have to worry as much as I feel other people would with putting their voices out there. But that said, I feel like the privilege that I have to be comfortable doing that means that I should be doing it more. Because if other people, are scared of being like retaliated against or punished, and I don't necessarily have that fear because of
Mhm.
my position in society, then I should use that, I guess is how I look at it.
One thing that we have talked about a lot so far is just like how heavy the news cycles are. I want to know, on a personal level, what do you do to avoid burnout or to avoid just being overwhelmed? Because it's a lot to take in. It's a lot of information that you're reading about, and it's honestly not good in any way, shape, or form. So, like, what do you do to make sure that you are not negatively impacted from all of the news cycles?
Yeah, well, for one, I am medicated. I'm on like a mood stabilizer, so that helps. But for people, where that isn't an option for them, I would say like take breaks. Like the news, yes, is nonstop, and it feels like you need to be nonstop online to see everything. But the one thing I feel like I've learned is that I think I saw another creator or an elected official or something say this on social media, but they said something about how you can wait until the end of the day and you can read, the stories about what happened throughout. I think it was AOC. It was AOC, I think. But she said just wait until the end of the day, catch up on your news at the end of the day, or in the morning, the previous day, whatever. You don't need to be like glued to your phone all the time. Obviously, as like a content creator reporting on this sort of stuff, you do need to be online a lot. But obviously, as a content creator, you need to be online a lot to get the information that
Yep.
you are making content on. But for your mental health, I think that that's far more important than like being in the know. And of course, being in the know and being educated and aware and all of that is very important. But if you're becoming aware to the detriment of your mental health, then you're just gonna spiral, and that's not good for anyone. Another thing that I will say is that not all news is breaking. I feel like
Mm.
a lot of content creators, I don't want to name drop, but I feel like we know the one. Everything is like breaking news. Everything is breaking news. But it's like, it's not. Just because things are breaking at a time doesn't mean that it's like breaking news. Um, And I feel like, yes, there is a lot happening that feels breaking because that's how Trump does it. He just impulsively, on a whim, does these executive orders, sues, appeals to the courts, all in an attempt to try to just get his way. And at the end of the day, we see a lot of these things not totally pan out, or they get shot down by a judge, or, this, that, and the other. So I feel like a lot of the times there's stuff that I see it and I'm like, okay, I'm going to report on this. And then by the time that I get done making a video and I'm about to post it, oh, like 10 minutes later, a judge says that's not happening. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, again, with the tariff stuff too, like, you make all these people, I saw all these content creators be like, I spent so much time, like, looking up certain items and where they were from and how much they would cost with these new inflation rate or these new tariff rates. And then, like, as soon as they post the video, the tariffs are a different amount, or they're paused, or, like, all this stuff happens, yes, but we, I guess, don't necessarily need to be aware of every single thing. Just more so how the sum of the parts affect the
Yep.
world and us as individuals, of course.
So how do you, Michael, and as an individual, where is your personal line for what is breaking news and what's not? How do you differentiate the two? Like, for instance, I got a news alert on my phone, like breaking news, and it was Gayle King and Katy Perry took off on their 11-minute ride to space, and I'm like, okay, that's not breaking news, but like, what? all that to say, as you said, not everything's breaking news, but how do you differentiate, like, okay, no, this is actually breaking and this is just, I don't want to say clickbait, but
Yeah.
just
But
trying to
yeah,
get you to click the notification?
yeah, for lack of a better term, clickbait.
Yeah.
I feel like, to me, something is considered breaking if it is going against someone's civil or human rights. So, Gayle King and Katy Perry going to space, that was not breaking news to me. But Trump, deporting people without due process, that's breaking news to me.
Yep.
And, a judge saying, the Supreme Court saying unanimously, you need to bring him back, and then him deliberately disobeying that. That's breaking news to me. But yeah, I guess it really is subjective, I guess, to every creator what they consider breaking news and what they consider important. But I feel like if I ever am in that spot where I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, is this something that I really need to share, or is this just like you said, like, just like a clickbaity moment in time, I really try to ask myself, like, okay, is this like taking away someone's civil rights, or is someone being treated unfairly that is, against our social code of ethics or the law or whatever. And I feel like, especially under Trump, those sorts of things are being so normalized that we're becoming desensitized to it. So I think that it's important to continue driving home the point that these are like civil rights that all human beings have, not just citizens of a country, not just people who are here legally. It's all people have these civil and human rights, and it's not really up to any one president or administration or whoever to pick and choose who gets those rights or not.
Yeah. Where I want to touch base on what you said a little bit ago in your answer about, does it impact civil and human rights, being able, that being the line on, is it breaking or is it not? And then Trump defined the court orders. From what you've seen, your knowledge on everything leading up to this point, I want to know your opinion on where this ends. Like, where does this end up? How, I don't have an opinion because I just don't even know where to begin to form it. So help me form that opinion. Where, like, from what you know, from what's happened to now, where do you think this goes and how it ends?
Well, I feel like answering that definitively, is a bit hard because at any moment someone could intervene and, finally step up and do what needs to be done to stop this. But if we're assuming that it's going on, unchecked and no one does anything, I feel like we're
Yep.
going to devolve into like full out authoritarianism, like we see in Hungary, like we see in El Salvador, and like we see in Russia. We know that Trump admires those people. He meets with them regularly, talks with them regularly, borrows a lot of tactics and strategies out of their playbook.
Hmm.
And even historians, scientists, economists, people that have studied their whole lives to be experts in these specific fields are all kind of saying the same thing, coming from different angles. Like they're saying economic wise, like policy wise, civil rights wise, just from every facet that you look at it, these experts are saying this is where he's taking us. And it's not like he's smart and, doing this slyly and, under the guise of doing something really good. And then, it's like he's very clearly telling us this is what I'm going to do. And he may be lying or saying that the outcome will be good, but I mean, all that's what's so frustrating because all it really takes is like a simple Google to be like,
Yeah.
if this happens, like if he does this, will this happen? And usually it's like, no, like what he said will happen is that's not the likely outcome if he does this. So I feel like if we keep going at this rate, I think that his ultimate goal, which we're already seeing him doing, is to invalidate the free press, to dismantle the courts so that they can't really stop him or rule against him. And he wants to sow distrust in the people of the institutions that we have, which even starting in 2020, we've been seeing it start then and then kind of snowball and unravel to now, where people think, the 2020 election was stolen, and he still to this day says that, and he says that the judges and the courts are all corrupt and activist judges, and these judges are nonpartisan. They're appointed because they have spent their entire lives doing this, and that they are, quote, neutral. And actually, I feel like a lot of people don't know this, but the DOJ and judges in general tend to skew center right. Even if there's
Hmm.
someone who claims to be completely nonpartisan and neutral, they still skew center right just because the right is the party of, law and order. And that's their thing, or it used to be. So I feel like this whole charade of like saying that the courts and all these institutions are against the Republicans or against him, I feel like that it's just not true. And they're against what he's doing, and they want him to stop what he's doing.
I don't know if it was last night or this morning. Mike Johnson had a press conference where he said that he talked about this a few weeks ago, and he doubled down today saying that Congress has the ability to dismantle the court system. They can remove federal districts, they can cut funding to federal districts, and that they're looking at all their options right now. And so with what you're saying, everyone says believe them when they say they're going to do something, and it's like they've told us they're doing this. We see it happening right now, right before us. And so it's just like, with hearing what you're saying, I'm like, yeah, no, it all makes sense. And on top of that, I don't understand how they think this ends like positively for them.
I
As you
real
said, just Google it. Google
That's
what.
the thing. Like, especially what I don't understand is people who are like 40s, 50s, 60s, however old. And the people who have been around the block, for their fair share of elections, Democratic and Republican, and they have lived through their fair share of administrations under, each party. I don't understand how people still think that the Republican Party, especially as it is now under Trump, is for the everyday working person. So what I feel like a lot of people don't realize, or maybe it's just not common knowledge, is that the first Bush put us into a recession, and then Clinton got us out of it. And then it happened again under the next Bush, sent us into a recession. And then Obama got us out of it. Trump put us into a recession. Biden got us out. And then now under Trump again, we're headed towards another recession. So I feel like it's, like I said earlier, it's a simple Google would tell people these things, but they seem to believe that the only source that is trustworthy is Trump himself and the people that, he deems as like appropriate or reliable sources.
Yeah.
And those are the people, again, with a simple Google, you will see that they are just flat out lying.
I need those people to understand that, like, I get, and this just, again, might be where I'm from. I almost understand why they say they trust him, right? He says he knows what he's doing with these tariffs. He's right. He knows what he's doing. It was market manipulation. It was to make him and everyone around him more rich in the period of a couple of days. And so, like, he's not lying about that. He knew exactly what he was doing, but it wasn't to help the people who put their faith in him. It blows my mind.
That's so true. I feel like they're one of the things about like narcissism is that the truth, like they always let the truth slip out. And if, like you said, like there's always a nugget of truth in what he says, to your point of, I know what I'm doing with the tariffs. Of course he does. And when he says, you'll never have to vote again, he knows what he means when he says that. And even if people write it off as like, oh, he was just joking, like,
no,
come on. Like, all the stuff that he's said aside from that people wrote off as a joke, or he's just kidding, or he's just saying that to rile the left up. Like, what, they've gone really quiet now that he's actually done those things.
Yep.
And one of the things that I really, like, I hearken back to, I guess, is I think it was around 2016, and I think it was maybe Hillary Clinton who said something about, like, if he wins, if he gets into the White House, like, say goodbye to Roe v. Wade. And everyone said that she was being overdramatic. He would never do that. That's the law of the land. It can't be overturned, blah, blah, blah. And then look what happened. So I feel like this whole, like, giving him the benefit of the doubt thing, especially when they would never give the benefit of the doubt to Biden or to Obama or to Kamala Harris, it just needs to end. And to your point, and to everyone's point, like, believe him and take him seriously when he says these things. He is not a serious person, but he can do serious things, and he will.
We're rounding out and at this interview, and we're nearing the end, and I always end with asking my guests what they're not wrong about. So, Cokehead, I want to know, what is it that you're not wrong about?
Let me just say, I watched previous episodes and I stewed on this question, and I think I have a good one. So, what I am not wrong about is that women are not the more emotional gender. And you see this with who starts all the wars? Who starts the wars? Who commits acts of violence against people unprovoked, to their own families, to their loved ones? Not women, usually. Vast majority of the time. And actually, hold on, I wrote down a list of things that I want to say for this one. So, all the world's wars started by men. All these perpetrators of gun violence, men. And have you ever seen a man react when his favorite team loses on TV.
Mm.
Like punching the TV, ripping the TV off the wall. In more extreme cases, we see, violence against family members and friends. Like, and even we were just talking about it, but Elon and Peter Navarro, arguing and getting into it on social media because, like, calling each other names, and the reaction that gets from KK Caroline Levitt is just, oh, boys will be boys. That's just how it is. You should be thankful that we're being so transparent. Whereas if it was two women doing that, they'd be getting called all the names in the book. So that is what I'm not wrong about. Men are fragile. They have weak egos, especially MAGA men. And I'll leave it there.
You are not wrong. Michael, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
As I always say, it is a treat. It was a treat having Michael on today's episode. I'm really thankful for his time. So, Michael, thank you for being on today's episode. Thank you for sharing your information, your insight, your knowledge, everything. Thank you for being here with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to all of us. I know today's episode was not that short. We had about, I think, 37 minutes of conversation with him. And trust me, the interview went quite longer than that. So we had to really cut it down to make sure that we could fit it all into one episode. So again, thank you, Michael. If you like today's episode, please be sure to leave a comment, give us a review, give us 5 stars on whatever platform it is that you're listening to. If you're on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe, give us a like and a comment. If you're on Apple, again, would love if you would give us a review, whatever it may be. Again, if you would like to leave a voice message about what you're not wrong about, you can call 205-538-3202 and leave a voice message about what it is that you're not wrong about. I would love nothing more to feature it on an episode. As always, you know that you can find me here on He's Not Wrong on any channel or platform that you get your podcasts at, and I release new episodes every Sunday. And with that being said, I will see you then. Bye.